Welcome back to another video. We're going to talk about scales and debunk a lot of the ways in which we are taught and how to practice. Scales often get a bad rap, especially with how they're presented in jazz books. A lot of people don't know how to use them effectively in their improvisation. We're going to go over the best ways to practice and apply scales, working on things like starting and ending on different notes besides the root, using legato phrasing, and really importantly, we're going to talk about accenting and articulation on how to make our scales swing and sound more musical. This touches on a subject that I go into much more detail on one of my first courses coming out called Meaningful Melodies, which is the complete guide on how to solo on anything you come across. So let's say we have a E minor 7, or we're going to use E Dorian, which is really a D major scale. Now books would teach you how to start on the root of the mode and end on the root. Now this makes sense logically, but it's actually terrible advice for learning how to use these things musically and real-world improv. Here's how most people would learn to use and play the scale, which is what you don't want to do. Great. Nobody wants to listen to that. I personally would never play like that. So the first thing you want to do is work on your swing and your accenting by accenting the offbeats. So you want to accent every other note. Right away, that already sounds a lot more interesting. The other ways you can work on this is adding different rhythms, like say eighth note triplets. Now that's still starting and ending on the root. I recommend you start on any note of the scale and be able to play it up and down, starting or ending on any note. Descending first, picking any random note. That's already going to break you out of that box of playing in the mode or starting and ending on the root all the time right away. You can also even start from where the mode comes from. It's really a D major scale. If I started on D, that would already make it sound better than starting on the root E. Another way to practice and work on this is just take any left-hand voicing, whether that's root and 10th, it could be root position, rootless, any sort of E minor voicing. And you can work on running the scale in your right hand and working on your left hand comping. For example, you could play the Charleston, the reverse Charleston, the and a 2 and a 4, more spontaneous rhythms where you're playing short hits and then sustaining or vice versa. So here's an example. I'm going to play and of 2 and a 4, taking just a root position voicing and practicing the scale with accenting. Now let's say I did like more of a shuttle where I play a root and 5th or a root and I come up rootless like so. So I'm still just using eighth notes. One key to really make your scales sound more musical is to play them with different kinds of rhythms. That could be eighth notes. You could go into eighth note triplets or quarter note triplet. Now the other thing too is really just changing the order. You don't always have to run up and down. You can stay where you are and just hit notes back and forth and create little patterns like so. You might skip a note here and there. For example, I didn't hit that C sharp right there. So the key is playing this as musically as possible and thinking in short phrases. I could make a scale run as a sort of motif, like so. And again, you can work on any sort of left hand rhythms. So when you're practicing scales, I really recommend, say, if I'm doing E Dorian, you start both hands, even in your warm-ups, just starting on different notes like so. Starting and ending on different notes, you can come descending first and then ascend, all kinds of ways. Key thing is making little phrases or sequences with your scales. And the sequence is just a recurring pattern through the scale. Say I did this. Now that's just a 3-note sequence, or it could be this. Another way to practice that, of course, is broken thirds. Etc., etc. So when you're playing scales, try and use them as melodic fragments, and especially if you start on the 3rd or the 5th, that can also work well. Now, another way to work on this for 2-5-1s and things, let's take a major 2-5-1 to D major. I can use the D major scale over all of that, because if you really think about it, the D major scale is your key center approach. It's the one scale that will fit over all of those chords. And this works because the D major scale is really E Dorian. So it works for the E minor on the 2 chord. For the A7, D major is really A mixolydian. So instead of playing like this, which is what most people might start with and what you want to avoid, is starting on the roots like this. You do not want to do that. It will work over all of that. So same thing, you should be able to start and end on any note of that scale. And this is a good way to practice, and it's called continuous scale practice. So that would sound like this. Now, as you saw there, it just happened to end on the root, but sometimes that will happen and sometimes not. Well, let's say I started on a different note. So oftentimes you can just play little patterns that are fit right within your hand like I did there. So let's say if I just stayed in one area, how much music could I make without moving my right hand too much? So what makes all of this work is really just the rhythm, the accenting of the offbeats, and just changing up rhythm or the note values. Now, once you start to use other modes, like let's say I do a 2-5-1 to D major, you can start to be more specific with the scales you outline. So continuous scale practice is a great way to force you to be adaptable in that way. Let's say I did a 2-5-1. So on E minor, I'm going to play E Dorian, which is D major. On the A7, I'm going to play the altered scale, which is B flat melodic minor. And then I'm going to resolve to a D major pentatonic sound. So that would be F sharp minor pentatonic. If you found the video useful, please like and subscribe to the channel. Check out the free guides in the description. There's a free guide on where to start if you're new to jazz piano. There's a practice structuring guide on how to organize and structure your practice if you're overwhelmed or don't know what to work on. And there's a modes cheat sheet which covers all the modes of major and melodic minor. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next video.